Welcome to Caregiver Council, Elder Law Insights with Tieesha Taylor.
Welcome back to Caregiver Council, Elder Law Insights with Tieesha Taylor. Tieesha is the founder and CEO of the elderly care law firm in South Florida, where she provides compassionate, generational legal service to families navigating Medicaid, guardianship, probate, as well as long-term care. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about what to do legally after a dementia diagnosis. When memory and decision-making begin to change, so do the steps families need to take to keep their loved ones safe and their wishes respected. Tieesha, welcome back.
Thank you.
So tough thing here when a family first receives a dementia diagnosis. You know, obviously they're emotional, they're unsure. It's a tough mental and emotional place to be. What are the very first legal priorities that you help them focus on?
Yeah, great question. The first thing I tell families is this: you don't have to figure it out in one day. Sometimes people will come to us for a consultation. They want to know every single thing and figure out everything. But I say, just take a few legal steps at a time. The first step and the first priorities is just making sure that your loved one has their legal documents in place, such as the power of attorney, the healthcare surrogate, maybe a will, maybe a trust, but making sure that they have their legal documents in place and protecting their finances and creating a medical plan so the doctors know who they can speak to on behalf of their loved one.
Probably as people drag their feet as far as getting things in place. It's an uncomfortable situation. It's not always easy to take the bull by the horns and get after it. What kind of things do you see happen when people take too long to plan and get something in place?
Yeah, so one of the major things is, for example, if someone is diagnosed with dementia and a family takes too long, at some point, that person, their family member who they care about, may no longer be able to make decisions, may no longer be able to sign documents because they lose the capacity to do so and to understand what they're signing. So that can force the family into a guardianship proceeding, it can be expensive, it can be stressful, and it removes many of their loved ones' rights. So planning early keeps control in the family and out of the court's hands. So I know waiting seems like we need to figure out other things to do, but getting those legal documents in place early is important, and don't delay.
Yeah, our last episode we talked about sibling disputes and issues and things like that, and yeah, probably a lot better if you can plan ahead and not have to worry about the courts deciding these things. That could just add to the tension, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the courts can appoint, typically they appoint family members, but I've been in situations where the siblings were in dispute, in conflict so much that the court ended up appointing a private guardian, someone who doesn't even know their loved one. So if you plan in advance, you can avoid a lot of those situations.
Wow. I mean, do things have to get real bad for them to do that, I would imagine?
Yes, very
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, I would think so. Probably
Yeah.
a last resort for the courts.
Yes, exactly. Because there was no one else, and these two siblings, they were fighting, and just became really nasty. That's what I call it.
God, that's tough. That's so tough. Are there any particular legal documents that you feel are most urgent at that early stage?
Yeah, and I listed a few previously, but I would say if I were to provide a list, the first one is the durable power of attorney, just naming someone who can make financial decisions for you. A healthcare surrogate with what we call HIPAA language. So this allows you to name someone to speak to your doctors, make healthcare decisions if you can. Sorry. Make healthcare decisions if you can, and also access medical records if necessary. A living will, which basically says if you can't make decisions and you have an end-stage condition or terminal condition, you're giving instructions to your family and your doctors. And sometimes we will put together a trust. So not always, but a trust also may be required or be suggested in those situations. Though these documents just give the family legal authority to step in when they need to and to make decisions, so that if a person declines in health, they already have these documents in place so that they can make decisions.
Do you help guide families through that balance between honoring a loved one's independence and protecting them from financial or medical harm? Because I could see, like, you hear stories. I've known people who've dealt with parents going through dementia, and they don't a lot often realize what's going on. The people that are having this diagnosis, because they don't see that as being an issue. So sometimes they want to remain independent. How do you balance that? It's got to be tough.
Yeah, I know this may sound cliche, but I try to focus on what I call dignity first. So, really think about your loved ones and their dignity. Try to maintain that and keep that as much as possible. So, we keep the loved ones involved in the decision making process as much as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to think about that person's dignity. Is this what they would want?
Right.
A lot of your family members, you know them better than anyone else. The decisions you're making, is it because you're making the decision because you're stressed out, or are you making that decision based on your love for your loved one? So we allow them to pick who they trust when we are meeting with those who may have that early diagnosis. We want them to pick the people and choose the people they trust, and they know a lot of times who they would trust. I mean, there are some children who are better at things than others. One child may be
Yeah.
better at finances, the other one may be better at making healthcare decisions. So let them make those decisions. And again, I can't emphasize enough, planning early lets the caregivers help behind the scenes, while still respecting the seniors and elders' independence.
Obviously, the disease can progress, or it does progress. Things get worse, things get harder. Families might disagree more about who should make the decisions or what decisions should be made. Do you find that early planning, as you just mentioned, kind of helps throughout the entire, process of this?
It does, yeah. So early planning it does a lot of things, but primarily what it does, it just gives like a clear direction. So it allows the person who has that diagnosis, it allows them to make the decisions. And so what I found was when children see that their parent made an informed decision, a lot of times they'll respect that decision. But if the parent did not put that in writing, or they did not list who they want to make decisions, then the family is left with no options but to, try to decide who would mom or dad have chosen. I always call planning in advance an act of love for your family, because when
Hmm.
you put these documents in place, you are reducing the opportunity for conflict. You're showing love to your family, letting them know what your wishes are so they don't have to guess. So when a person signs these documents early, it prevents a lot of arguments and confusion later.
And the stress and perhaps guilt of making certain decisions. If you plan, then you can take that off the table for people in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I talk about the living will, which, if someone is ever in a vegetative state, or they can't make decisions on their own, and they have a living will in place that lets their family and doctors know what type of treatment, if at all, they would want.
Hmm.
That's a very powerful document, because I've had families that come to me, they were like, Mom or Dad didn't have this in place, and now we don't know what to do. One child says, let's see what's going to happen, keep mom or dad continuously receiving this treatment. And another one may say, well, no, mom or dad wouldn't want to live in this state, they
Yeah.
would want the quality of life. And so it creates conflict. But the living will itself, if mom or dad put it in writing, they'll see it. And so whatever decision is made, they'll know they made it based off what their loved one wanted.
You've mentioned dignity a lot. Are there protections under Florida law that help ensure a person with dementia is treated with dignity and their voice is still part of the process?
Yeah, so Florida, we have a huge aging population, which is
Yeah.
great. A part of the guardianship process, for example, they allow capacity evaluations. And then you can, where medical professionals can conduct an evaluation and see if that person has the capacity to make decision or to keep certain rights. And I discussed in the other episode things like least restrictive alternatives. So before the courts appoint someone else or tries to get someone else to make decisions on behalf of a loved one, they look at other options. What other options are there? Are there a power of attorney? Are there healthcare surrogates? And then In Florida, we have strong exploitation laws because that occurs a lot when you have a state that has a huge aging population. There's a lot of exploitation going on. So we definitely have some strong exploitation laws. And the goal is basically to ensure that the person is treated with respect and safety to make sure they're safe.
Yeah, you brought that up a couple times. You do, yeah. Florida obviously is known for a lot of older people
Mm-hmm.
moving there because it's they don't
Sunshine.
want to get they want to get away from the cold,
The sunshine,
the
yes.
sunshine, the beach, the lack of snow. Like, there's a lot of reasons. So yeah, it's good that they have those protections in place, considering how many elderly people are always flocking to Florida.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So for any caregivers that might be listening that are feeling overwhelmed or are just really super stressed out, do you have any practical steps, advice for organizing the paperwork, making things more manageable, taking some of that pressure off?
Yeah, I would say the caregiver should just start by just keeping all documents in one folder or binder. Something as simple as that, making sure they're in one location. So you're
Yeah.
not looking over here, looking in this file cabinet. Just put them all in one location. Make a list of accounts and passwords if possible. That way you're not trying to find the password or trying to find this account exists and how do I log in or have access. So putting all of that in one place. And I found that setting up some sort of automatic payments for your loved ones so that they're coming out of the account automatically. That way you're not doing it, writing checks or doing things on a
Yep.
monthly basis.
Missing bills.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. They're missing it. Absolutely. So I would think those are, the first steps is just do that. Just take small steps at a time and it'll make things easier.
You've been doing this for a while now. Can you share an example perhaps of a family that actually did plan thoughtfully after a dementia diagnosis, and what you saw in the process and how much more smoothly it went?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about a couple of clients. Two sisters came to see me one time. Their dad had an early diagnosis of dementia. They were trying to determine if he should go into assisted living, skilled nursing facilities. Dad was competent to make decisions. We met with him. We met with the three of them also. I met with him alone and I met with him and his daughters. And we came up with a plan. We put together the power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, will, trust, all of those documents were in place. They eventually put him in an assisted living facility where he didn't require a lot of care. But over the years, he declined. And so he then required 24-hour nursing care. So he went to a skilled nursing facility. And unfortunately, he passed away last year. But the sisters came back to me because they had a few questions about wrapping everything up. And they said they were so happy that they put these documents in place because they were able to step in and make decisions for dad. And basically, dad passed away peacefully because he knew his daughters were caring for everything and they didn't run into any issues because the banks would speak to them. Their assets were dad's assets. His home was didn't have to go through probate when he passed away. So the entire plan was put into place for them so that they were very happy. So they called to thank us for putting that in place for dad.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's the best you can ask for in those situations. They're tough diagnoses. So
Yeah.
taking that example of the two sisters, if they hadn't planned, obviously each case is unique,
Yeah.
but what kind of hurdles would they have had to deal with?
Yeah, the first one is they would not have been able to access dad's bank accounts without some sort of
Hmm.
court intervention. And they had to access his accounts because he was applying for government benefit Medicaid. So Medicaid can help pay for his long term care. That's the first thing. They wouldn't be able to really make healthcare decisions for him because they wouldn't have those documents in place. And then after he passed away, because we had planned, we had transferred his assets to a trust. They did not have to go to court after he passed away and go through probate court. So the property that dad left them went directly to them without an attorney involved, without the courts involved. So they were able to get the property and they were telling me they were going to sell it and, deal with that. And as they're, dealing with the death of their dad, they were selling the property and they were able to move on with their lives without going through the court process. So that's what could have happened if they did not plan in advance.
Yeah, I have a buddy who lost his mom, and they did not have a plan, and
Mm,
been through the probate process, and I saw firsthand how difficult it is to grieve and deal with estates and things like that at the same time. And it's I can tell you, I'm not just saying this because I'm on the other side of this interview. It's not easy, and
not.
it can get
Mm-mm.
really complicated and very emotionally draining.
Yeah, you're correct. And a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, you're first
Yeah.
dealing with the death of a loved one, like you stated.
Hmm.
And then on top of that, you have to deal with all these other issues, paperwork, courts involved, not knowing how to access, the assets. We have some family members when they do go through that probate process, they can't even speak to the mortgage company because they don't
Right.
have that authority. So all of those things compounded while you're dealing with the death of a loved one is very traumatic and emotional.
Absolutely. For anyone who might be, I don't know, suspecting that a loved one may be slipping, maybe showing signs of, of dementia, but hasn't actually been diagnosed, are there any things that, is there anything that you would recommend that they do at this early stage to help them
Mhm.
later on?
Yeah, I would say start with I'll call it a gentle conversation with the loved one about planning. Sometimes that conversation is not easy. I know some children come to me, they said, "Oh, my parents don't even want to discuss it," you know. Start with a gentle conversation, like ask, say things like, I want to make sure I do things the way you want. Can we put a plan in place? Can we talk about who you trust to help you with your finances or medical decisions someday? Or listen, can I schedule an appointment to meet with an elder care attorney? Because what I do sometimes parents will open up with me when their children are outside of the room and they'll open up and tell me what their wishes are, and we're trained on how to have these conversations. So I would say start that way, start with the gentle conversation of getting your parent or your loved one moving in that right direction, and prepare early if
Hmm.
possible.
Yeah. Well, great advice as always. Thanks for that. And thank you all for listening to today's episode of Caregiver Council Elder Law Insights with Tieesha Taylor. If your family is facing questions about dementia, caregiving, or long term planning, you don't have to do this alone. Visit elderlycarelawfirm.com to learn how Tieesha and her team can help. And if this episode brought any clarity or comfort, please share, review, like. We really appreciate all of that, and we've got lots of great stuff coming your way. So hit that subscribe button as well. Tieesha, I always love chatting with you. Thanks so much.
Likewise, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.